The breakfast table at the Clark household always began with the same scene. Barbara solemnly placed pancakes on plates, serving first her husband Robert, then young Thomas, followed by the ever-smiling Diana. By the time a plate was set before Avery, the pancakes had grown cold. Avery Clark had understood the unspoken rules of this household from an early age. In the Clark family, males were given priority, and old-fashioned values about carrying on the family name had been passed down through generations. Avery's father Robert was a well-known local real estate agent who dreamed of passing down the family business to the grandson he hoped would one day be born, rather than to his daughters. "The pancakes are truly delicious today," her younger sister Diana said in a sweet voice. She wore a blue dress that matched Barbara's eye color, looking almost like a younger version of her mother. Barbara smiled with satisfaction. "Thank you, Diana. I added blueberries today because they're Thomas's favorite." 10-year-old Thomas, seated at the edge of the table, was already absorbed in his handheld game, bored with the conversation. His very existence was a kind of proof of value in this household. A boy, an heir, the hope of the Clark family. "Thomas, put the game away during meals," Diana gently admonished, though there was no sternness in her voice. Avery sipped her coffee and checked the time. She would soon have an online meeting with an important client. She had steadily built her career as an IT consultant. Choosing a path different from her family's expectations had earned her the label of being odd, but that was also her strength. "Leaving early again?" Barbara cast a cold glance her way. Avery shook her head slightly. "I have a project deadline approaching." "Working all the time like you do, you'll never meet a nice man." Barbara's words contained more criticism than concern. "When I was Diana's age, I was already pregnant with my second child." Diana giggled and gently stroked Thomas's hair. "Avery's job is her lover, mother." Avery stood up without answering and cleared her dishes. Such conversations were commonplace. Her success was always treated as secondary in this household. Still, Avery had no regrets about her choices. As a consultant for a prominent Silicon Valley firm, she had found a place where she could fully utilize her abilities. And there, she met someone who would change her life. Michael Novak was one of her clients. He was an ambitious entrepreneur trying to change the world with innovative technology. From their first meeting, a special chemistry developed between them. Michael was impressed by Avery's cool analysis and insights, while Avery was drawn to his passion and creativity. "I need someone like you to bring my ideas to life," Michael told her during their first dinner together. That night, they talked until dawn. About the future of technology, dreams of entrepreneurship, and gradually, about their pasts and hopes. Falling in love was easy. Michael respected Avery's work and highly valued her intelligence. With him, she wasn't odd, she was an amazing woman. Marriage seemed a natural progression. When Avery introduced Michael to her family, Barbara and Diana were impressed by his handsome appearance and charming demeanor but frowned at his unstable career. "An entrepreneur? Does that mean you don't have a steady job?" Barbara asked while planning the wedding. Avery smiled. "Michael has his own vision. He'll succeed." After marriage, Avery and Michael rented a small apartment in San Francisco and began pursuing their dreams together. Avery continued her stable consulting work while Michael immersed himself in developing his big idea, an application that would revolutionize education. They thought they had built an ideal partnership. However, Michael's startup plans involved significant risks. Initial investment was needed, and it would take time to generate revenue. Avery invested part of her savings to support his dream. "It's an investment in our future," she thought. Then something unexpected happened. Avery became pregnant. Though unplanned, they welcomed the news with joy. However, this happy announcement had complicated effects on Michael's startup timing. His app development had entered the final stage, and he faced tough decisions. Should he seek further investment or take the safer route? With a child on the way, responsibilities would double. "With a baby coming, our responsibilities will double," Michael murmured late one night, gazing out the window. "We're going to be a family." Avery placed her hand on his back. "We'll get through this. I don't want you to give up on your dream. Michael turned to her with a gaze full of deep affection and determination. I'd do anything for you and our child. Avery didn't immediately understand the true meaning of his words. She simply felt safe in his arms. Congratulations, Avery. It's a healthy baby girl. The midwife's gentle voice echoed through the hospital room. Avery smiled through her exhaustion as she cradled the tiny baby in her arms. Lily. She had already decided on the name. The father was nowhere to be seen. Where's Michael? Avery asked through her hazy consciousness. Have you heard from him? The nurse shook her head apologetically. We still can't reach him. But don't worry. Many fathers panic at the moment of birth. Deep down, however, Avery sensed something was wrong. Over the past few weeks, Michael had gradually become distant. Conversations grew shorter, he came home late more often, and his eyes held something unspoken. Her intuition proved correct. An envelope arrived in her hospital room containing Michael's wedding ring and a simple letter. To Avery. I'm sorry to you and Lily. I wasn't prepared for this responsibility. At this critical point in my startup, I can't expose a family to financial uncertainty. You both need more stability than I can provide. I hope someday you'll understand. Michael. Avery's fingers went limp, and the letter fell to the floor. She gazed at the baby in her arms. Lily looked up at her mother innocently. Seeing that pure, trusting gaze, Avery steeled her resolve. It's okay, Lily. Mama's here. On the day of her discharge, Avery returned to the apartment. However, there was barely a trace of Michael left. His clothes, his books, his computer, all gone. All that remained were their shared memories and the reality that there were only 2 weeks until the next rent payment was due. Avery calmly analyzed the situation. Her savings had been invested in Michael's startup, and she had no income since she had temporarily stopped working for the birth. The apartment rent was too expensive for her alone. There was essentially only one option: to rely on her family. The thought of returning to a childhood home that had never been particularly warm twisted her stomach. But for Lily's sake, she swallowed her pride. Mom, just for a while. Barbara's voice was cold on the other end of the phone. However, faced with the fact of a grandchild's birth, she reluctantly agreed. When Avery stood at her parents' doorstep, Lily was asleep against her chest. The door opened to reveal Barbara's stern face. Come in, Barbara said tersely. Her eyes moved from Avery's tired face to Lily. It's a girl, isn't it? Avery nodded. This is Lily. Would you like to hold her? Barbara took a step back. Later. Let me show you to your room first. Avery's former room had been turned into a storage space. Barbara moved a few boxes and said, this should be enough. There was no crib, so Avery would have to sleep with Lily in her bed. Where are Diana and Thomas? Avery asked. Diana's taking Thomas to soccer practice. They'll be back for dinner. That night's dinner would be etched deeply in Avery's memory. I never thought you'd actually come back, Diana said, tilting her wine glass. Especially in your situation. Avery continued eating silently, with Lily in her arms. How long do you plan to stay? Barbara asked. How should I explain your situation to the neighbors? My situation? Avery said quietly. You mean having a baby and being abandoned by my husband? Avery. Barbara raised her voice. Don't say such shameful things out loud. Shameful? Avery's voice trembled. I'm shameful? Barbara slammed her dishes on the table. Of course. A disgrace who had a girl and was abandoned by her husband. You've always been that way. Half-hearted in everything, always tarnishing the family reputation. Look at Diana. She's raised a fine boy and built a perfect family. Diana smiled proudly. Mom, don't blame Avery. She tried. She just chose the wrong person. Avery stood up, shaking with anger and humiliation. Lily and I are leaving tomorrow. Leaving? Where will you go? Barbara scoffed. You have nothing. No job, no husband, no money. There's no place in this world for a single mother with a baby girl. Yes, there is, Avery said quietly. Give up these foolish ideas, Barbara raised her voice. You're here because I allow it. But there's a condition. That child will be put up for adoption. Then you can start a new life. A heavy silence filled the room. Adoption? Avery repeated in disbelief. My daughter? That's the only solution, Barbara said coldly. We don't need someone who brings shame to this family. We want to help you. But we have no obligation to take on that mistake. Diana interjected, Avery, be realistic. A single mother is a burden to everyone, especially family. Have you thought about how your presence will affect Thomas? He'll be confused. Avery held Lily tightly to her chest. The warmth of that small body gave her strength. Realistic? Avery said quietly. Here's reality. I have a daughter. She's my responsibility and my joy. She's someone I need to protect. Barbara stood up and pointed her finger. If you won't give her up, then leave this house. You're disowned. You're no longer my daughter. Avery took a deep breath. Lily moved slightly in her arms. She looked at her daughter's face and for the first time in her life, understood what true love was. Unconditional, pure love. I understand, Avery said quietly. She stood up and left the room with Lily in her arms. There was no need to pack. All she truly needed was already in her arms. The next morning, Avery left the house with a bag containing only the bare essentials slung over her shoulder and Lily in her arms. In her pocket was a message from her college friend Sarah, I've started a small startup. We need someone with IT knowledge. Interested? Avery didn't look back. An uncertain future lay ahead, but one thing was certain, she and Lily were together. And that was everything. In a small apartment in the suburbs of San Francisco, Avery checked her appearance on her laptop screen. Her interview blouse was old, but she tried to make it look clean and presentable. In the next room, 3-month-old Lily was with a temporarily hired high school babysitter from the neighborhood. It's going to be okay, Avery reassured herself. This isn't my last chance. Sarah's face appeared on the Zoom screen. A friend from college days, now a woman entrepreneur trying to make her way in the tech industry. Avery. It's been a while. How are you? Avery felt some of her tension ease at Sarah's warm smile. To be honest, it's been tough, Avery said with a tired smile. But I have to keep moving forward. Sarah's expression turned serious. Your skills are highly regarded in the industry. We're still a small startup, but your experience as an IT consultant is valuable, especially in educational technology. Educational tech? A momentary pain shot through Avery's heart. That had been Michael's dream field. Yes. A digital learning platform. The salary is less than your previous job, but it's primarily remote work, so you can be with Lily. Avery looked out the window. She had few options. Her savings were running low, and the apartment rent was high. Besides, there seemed to be some meaning in the ironic fate of working in a field that competed with Michael's company. I'll take it, Avery said, looking at Sarah. When can I start? Even tomorrow, Sarah answered with a smile. We need a savior. Savior, it was ironic to be called that when she herself was seeking salvation. The first few months were a series of trials. During the day, she faced her computer, handled client meetings, and at night, she took care of Lily. Her small apartment was her office, nursery, and home. Sleep deprivation and financial anxiety became her daily reality. But Avery had strengths. She had always excelled at analyzing difficulties and finding solutions. She quickly established her role in Sarah's startup and focused on building relationships with clients. Your approach is fantastic, Sarah said in a phone call celebrating her first success. The client's feedback is excellent. Avery smiled. This is just the beginning. That was true. Avery continued working even after Lily fell asleep at night. She researched the educational app market and analyzed competitors' products. This included Michael's company. His startup seemed to be doing well. He was introduced in the media as a rising star in educational tech. Avery was hit with complex emotions when she saw those articles, but she quickly refocused on her own path. A year passed, and Sarah's company was gradually growing. Avery was no longer just a consultant but had become a project manager handling multiple clients. Her salary increased, allowing her to move to a larger apartment. One evening, Avery found Lily's sketchbook. Her daughter, now 18 months old, still had few words but showed a strong interest in colors and shapes. Her use of crayons went beyond typical infant scribbles. There was something special in her color combinations and shape arrangements. "This is amazing," Avery couldn't help saying aloud. Lily looked up at her mother and gave an innocent smile. "It's very beautiful," Avery hugged her daughter. "You seem to have a special talent." That night, an idea struck her. While working on developing the digital learning platform, Avery had always felt something was missing. It was an element that would bring out children's creativity. The lessons and drills were efficient, but they lacked artistic elements and components that nurture creative thinking. The next morning, she approached Sarah with her idea. "I want to create an app that nurtures children's creativity. Something different from conventional educational apps, a fusion of art and learning." Sarah showed interest but was cautious. "That's an interesting concept. But market research and prototype development require resources." "Let me proceed with it on my own responsibility," Avery said eagerly. "I'll work on development during weekends and evenings." For the next few months, Avery led a double life. During the day, she worked on Sarah's company projects, and at night, she spent time developing an educational app based on Lily's ideas. Lily's intuitive sense of color and way of capturing shapes brought a new perspective to the app's design. Did Lily draw this? Sarah was surprised to see the design proposal from 3-year-old Lily. Avery nodded. "When I incorporated her sensibilities, the app's interface became much more appealing." Sarah said admiringly, "This is truly innovative. A design created by a child for children, there's nothing like it on the market." When the prototype of the app incorporating Lily's design was completed, Avery proposed it as an official project for Sarah's company. Although there were initially skeptical reactions, the response from test users was overwhelmingly positive. Children became engrossed in the app, and parents were impressed by its educational effects. "Avery, this could be a big opportunity," Sarah said excitedly. "Major tech companies are showing interest." That became their turning point. A major player in the educational tech industry came forward with an offer to acquire the app. However, Avery had a larger vision. "We're not selling," she told Sarah. "This app is just the beginning. I want us to develop it ourselves." Sarah looked at her in surprise. "You're giving up a guaranteed income source?" "Not giving up, investing," Avery answered confidently. "If they're offering to acquire it, then it's worth growing in our own hands." Avery's decision was a big gamble. But her intuition proved correct. The app became a hot topic in the education industry, and the user base grew rapidly. Sarah's company was reorganized as A Creative Minds, with Avery recognized as a co-founder. 5 years passed. Avery was now the co-CEO of a successful company, and Lily had grown into an 8-year-old girl. Her artistic talent had blossomed further, and A Creative Minds apps featured a special section called Lily's Design Workshop. There, design templates and creative challenges conceived by Lily were offered, stimulating children's creativity. "Mom, I came up with a new design," Lily showed her sketchbook at the breakfast table. Avery smiled at her daughter's work. The simple yet sophisticated design looked almost professional. "That's wonderful, Lily. Let's incorporate it into our next update." Their apartment had changed to a spacious condominium in an upscale San Francisco neighborhood. From the windows, they could see the Golden Gate Bridge, and the walls were adorned with articles and certificates marking the mother-daughter success story. One day, an email arrived at Avery's office. It was from a well-known tech industry magazine. Dear Ms. Avery Clark, we would like to feature a success story about you and your daughter Lily in our publication. The title would be Genius Child Designer and Her Mother, Revolutionaries in Educational Tech. Would you be available for an interview? Avery stared at her computer screen for a while. 5 years ago, she had left home with nothing. And now, she and her daughter were being called revolutionaries. She looked out the window. The San Francisco sky was clear, and the future seemed bright. Every hardship has meaning, Avery whispered quietly. It makes us stronger. She began typing her reply to the email. Michael Novak picked up the latest tech industry magazine. It featured a special on innovators in educational tech. He was casually flipping through the pages when his hand suddenly stopped. A large spread photo, showing a familiar woman and a girl he had never seen. Avery Clark and Lily Clark, the mother-daughter CEO duo of Creative Minds. Michael sank deep into his chair. It had been a long time since he had seen her name. He had never tried to find out what happened to Avery after he left. The guilt was too overwhelming for him to have that courage. The article told the story of their success. A single mother who developed an innovative educational app while raising her daughter alone. And remarkably, the key to that success was her daughter, Lily. Her rare design sense and creativity had breathed life into the app. Lily Clark has already become a legend in the field of digital content design for children. Children intuitively know what's appealing, she says. A pain shot through Michael's chest. A photo of a girl he didn't know. But her eyes were unmistakably his. His startup had also been successful. He had made a name for himself in educational app development, and his company was now known as Novitech in the industry. But sometimes he felt an emptiness in that success. Especially on nights spent alone in his luxury apartment. The end of the article contained information about Creative Minds' new project. It was scheduled to be unveiled at an educational tech conference in San Francisco next month. Let me double-check. The presentation starts at 10, right? Avery was speaking through her earpiece. She was walking through the hotel lobby, making final confirmations for today's schedule. That's right. Lily is already at the venue for rehearsal, Sarah's voice replied. Thanks. I'll head there now. As Avery ended the call and moved toward the elevator, a voice called from behind. Avery? Her body froze at that voice. A voice she hadn't heard in 7 years. But she hadn't forgotten it. Slowly turning around, there stood Michael Novak. A bit older, with traces of gray in his hair, but unmistakably him. Michael, she said in a flat voice. Can we talk? He asked tensely. Coffee perhaps? Avery checked her watch. Just 10 minutes. In a corner of the cafeteria, they sat facing each other. After a silence, Michael spoke. I heard about your success. It's amazing. Avery stared at him expressionlessly. What's your purpose? Why now? Michael exhaled deeply. I wanted to apologize. Back then, I was a coward. I thought I was protecting you and Lily from the risks of my startup. But that's just an excuse. I ran from responsibility. Protected? Avery laughed coldly. Do you know what happened to us after you left? I had no choice but to rely on my family. Even there, I was rejected. I was on the streets with nothing, holding a newborn baby. Michael's face clouded. I'm truly sorry. I can't make amends, but could I meet Lily? Avery's expression hardened. Lily doesn't know about you. You have no right to suddenly appear in her life and confuse her. She's my daughter too, Michael said quietly. Biologically, yes, Avery stood up. 10 minutes are up. I have a presentation. Michael also stood. Please think about it. I've changed. I want to be part of Lily's life. Avery walked away without answering. But her heart was troubled. The presentation at the conference was a huge success. Especially the demo section led by Lily, which received enthusiastic applause from the audience. With confidence and composure that belied her 12 years, she spoke about her design philosophy. Later, Avery told Lily about Michael. In their hotel suite, they sat side by side on the sofa. "My father wants to meet me?" Lily asked calmly. Avery nodded. "It's your decision, Lily. If you don't want to, I'll refuse." Lily looked out the window thoughtfully. "I want to meet him," she finally said. "But only with you there, Mom." Their reunion took place in the hotel lobby lounge. There was an initial tense atmosphere, but Lily's calmness softened the mood. Michael was impressed by his daughter's talent and maturity, and Lily found elements of her own facial features and personality in Michael. Their relationship was built gradually. Michael never claimed the position of father but tried to blend naturally into Lily's life. The romantic feelings between Avery and Michael never rekindled, but a relationship of mutual respect was beginning to form. However, Avery's peaceful days began to crumble from another direction. A week after the conference, her smartphone rang with a call from an unfamiliar number. "Avery? Avery Clark?" The female voice was both familiar and uncomfortable. "Diana?" Avery said in surprise. "How did you get my number?" "I saw you in newspapers and online." Diana's voice had become softer than before. "Could we meet?" Avery hesitated. "Why now?" "I want to reconcile as family," Diana said. "Mother wants to see you too." The next day, Avery faced her sister for the first time in 7 years at a cafe in the San Francisco suburbs. Diana looked more worn than before. Her eyes held fatigue and anxiety rather than the superiority of the past. "Where's Mother?" Avery asked. "She couldn't come," Diana said apologetically. "Actually, we're in a difficult situation." The truth gradually emerged. Their father, Robert, had died 3 years ago, and the real estate business had collapsed, leaving debts. Barbara and Diana were facing financial difficulties. Furthermore, Diana's son Thomas was showing serious behavioral problems. He had avoided expulsion from school several times, but this time the situation was critical. "We need your help," Diana finally said clearly. "Mother said to ask you," even putting aside her pride. Avery laughed coldly. "You want money?" "Not just that," Diana quickly added. "Also about Thomas. You're an education expert, aren't you? We thought you might know how to help him." Avery stared at her coffee cup. Her heart was swirling with complex emotions. Vengeance, sympathy, and a strange sense of liberation. The reality that she was now in the superior position. "Let me meet Barbara and Thomas," Avery decided. "Then I'll make my judgment." 2 days later, Barbara, Diana, and Thomas visited Avery's condominium. Barbara had visibly aged, her former dignity subdued. Thomas had grown into a disgruntled 17-year-old who greeted her with few words. "Avery." Barbara's voice choked. "I'm glad to see you." Avery said, controlling her emotions. "Really? 7 years ago, you disowned me. You said, you're no longer my daughter." Barbara lowered her eyes. "I was wrong." "Me too," Diana added. "Back then, we were foolish." Lily entered the room. She addressed Barbara. "Are you my grandmother?" Tears welled in Barbara's eyes. "Yes, I am." Lily calmly looked at her. "Why did you throw my mom and me out?" A heavy silence filled the room. Avery placed her hand on Lily's shoulder and said quietly, "It's time for the truth." 2 years had passed since then. "Are you all right?" The doors open. Lily's voice startled Thomas, who turned around in surprise. At the Creative Minds studio, he had been intensely focused on 3D modeling. "Yes, I wanted to finish this design," Thomas said, a bit embarrassed. "It needs to be ready for next week's presentation." Lily laughed and sat next to him. Don't worry. With your talent, you'll be fine. Since that day when Avery confronted her family with the truth, new relationships had gradually been built. Avery decided to rebuild her relationship with Barbara and Diana on her own terms. Not unconditional forgiveness, but a new relationship based on mutual respect. She offered financial support, but with conditions. Barbara would abandon her old values and attend counseling. Diana would reconsider her approach to Thomas's education. The most surprising change appeared in Thomas. Starting as an intern at Avery and Lily's company, he began to develop hidden talents. His 3D modeling skills brought a new dimension to Creative Mind's new projects. I was wrong, Diana confessed to Avery one day. I always expected Thomas to be manly. I couldn't understand his creativity. She continued to work on repairing her relationship with her son. Barbara was changing too. Age and financial hardship had crushed her pride, but it was also the beginning of a new understanding. She now called Lily her wonderful granddaughter and genuinely took pride in her talents. The relationship with Michael had also stabilized. He had gradually become involved in Lily's life and now met with her regularly. There was no romantic relationship between him and Avery, but a friendship based on mutual understanding and respect had developed. Sometimes their companies collaborated on new projects in the education field. My life isn't perfect, Avery told Sarah over dinner. But I'm proud of my choices. In the San Francisco twilight, Avery stood on her home balcony, gazing into the distance. From the living room came the laughter of Lily, Thomas, and Michael playing a new game. Tomorrow, Barbara and Diana would visit too. They weren't a perfect family, but the coldness and rejection of the past were gone. Avery took a deep breath. When she left home with nothing, she couldn't have imagined such a future awaiting her. Hardship, challenges, and finally reconciliation. Life was unpredictable. Mom, look. Lily ran onto the balcony with her tablet. Thomas and I created a new design. Avery smiled and hugged her daughter. Wonderful. You both have such talent. Her life had taken unexpected paths. But now, she was certain. Every hardship ultimately exists to make you stronger. And true family exists not in blood ties, but in relationships where people cherish and support each other.